Hey everyone, it's Chuck Smoot. Back here again with conversations on BGLOs. Today we're going to be discussing the first part in a few videos I'm going to do covering BGLO conspiracies. These are things that people have said or claim that BGLOs are involved in and what have you. So we're going to explore a couple of these things really quickly. Today's episode installment, if you want to call it, is BGLOs and Freemasonry. So before I get into it, please remember, since I did not mention it on the first video, please remember to like, also subscribe, as I will be doing a few of these. And you can follow me on Twitter at the Rebel Deuce. That's TheRebelDeuce. So let's get right to the meat of it. BGLOs and Freemasonry. Now, I talked about the history of the creation of all the organizations and mentioned the creation briefly on Freemasonry. One of the things that I hear from time to time with pretty regularly is that the majority of the founders of the Black Greek organizations are Masons or Eastern Stars. Some have even said that 95% of the founders of the Black Greek organizations are Masons or Eastern Stars. And through my research, I will admit, years and years and years ago, I bought into that, never having done the research myself. But after doing the research, I can say that this is 100% incorrect. And here's why. So let's start with Alpha Phi Alpha. Out of the 7 founders of Alpha Phi Alpha, only 2 we have confirmed to have been members of the Masonic Order, and they were Robert Harold Ogle and George Biddle Kelly. It is suspected that 3 others of the Alpha founders were Masons. However, we do not have any definitive information regarding their membership. There's nothing showing that they actually did go on to become members of the Masonic Order. So only 2 from Alpha Phi Alpha. Now, there are a lot of early members in all the organizations, including Alpha, that would go on to become Masons after the creation of the organization. And it is pretty commonplace for individuals to belong to both organizations. Like myself, as I mentioned in the first video, I am a Prince Hall Mason. So the dual membership is not anything that is unusual or even anything nefarious. People just get interested and they decide to join both organizations. In terms of Kappa Alpha Psi, out of their 10 founders, only Elder Watson Diggs and Edward Giles Irvin are known to have been Masons. With Omega Psi Phi, of their 4 founders, only Edgar Love is confirmed to have been a Mason, and with Phi Beta Sigma, out of their 3 founders, only one was a Mason, again, Leonard Morse. Now, just for clarity's sake, the only reason I'm not dealing with the Iota Phi Theta right now is simply my focus regarding this is really the creation of the Black Greek organizations. And so we're talking the beginning of the 20th century. So, Iotas were not founded until 1963. So I'm not intentionally ignoring the Iotas, but we're really focusing for the beginning of the 20th century. However, I did try to look up some information about the backgrounds of some of the Iota founders. I need to do more research on that, and I will, and I'll be better informed for a future episode. But let's go back to that. The majority of BGLO founders, are Masons, or 95% of them are Masons, or what have you. The reality is, as I just named, out of the 24 founders of the first 4 Black fraternities, only 6 of them were Masons, which comes out to 25%, not 95%, not even a majority. So, not sure exactly where that majority or 95% idea or figure comes from. I think it is just people making projections or assuming that there was more of a connection between the founding of the organizations than there was. And speaking of which, another thing that a lot of people like to say, especially people who are Masons, and especially Prince Hall Masons, and let me just say, for those of you who are unaware, Prince Hall is the first Black branch of Freemasonry. In fact, Prince Hall Masonry was actually started before most other branches of Masonry in the country, including the Caucasian areas. Prince Hall got the charter for Masonry in the 1780s or 1790s or something like that, and so got the charter to create other Grand Lodges and what have you way before a lot of other branches of Masonry. But as a result, you have people saying that Prince Hall Masonry, or Masonry in general, they are the father of the Greeks, that without Freemasonry, there would be no Black Greek organization and what have you. And, I get it. I understand why people say it. I don't fully agree with it. I think, honestly, a case can be made to go either way, but to say definitively that the Masons are the father of Black Greeks is only applicable if you look at it in terms of when the organizations were founded. We have the late 1700s, late 1790s actually, and the early 1900s. On that case, if you're just looking at what predated what, then yeah, you can make a case for that. But outside of that, there's no other relationship between the organizations. Now, let's also talk about the influence in the creation of Freemasonry on Alpha Phi Alpha. I'm sorry, not on Alpha Phi Alpha, but on all the Black Greek organizations. Apologize for that. Sometimes I'm too alpha-centric. But the reality is that what you had, particularly with the creation of Alpha Phi Alpha, and I think the same can be said for Kappa Alpha Psi, is that some of the founders, as today, students had to work while they went to school. And some of the founders worked at white fraternity houses where they got information, got inspiration. They saw what the white frats were doing, and they're like, hey, we should be able to do the same thing ourselves. I can say with certainty that one of the Alpha founders did work at a white fraternity house to help pay his tuition. And he was inspired, and there is evidence to suggest maybe that he saw some ritual or ritualistic things laying around, and that may have served as a minor inspiration in terms of development on the rituals and the procedures of the fraternity. But there was no direct influence from any other types of organizations. Now, keep in mind, I'm not telling any secrets out of school, and this stuff is, private information. I mean, public information. It is not private information. Some of it can be found in our history books. But at the very most, there was just a very coincidental relationship. I guess that's the best way to put it, between BGLOs and Freemasonry when the Black Greek organizations were started. Now, in terms of the Eastern Stars, let's keep in mind, and it bears mentioning also in terms of Masonry, that the rules for admission for membership are different now than they were at the beginning of the 20th century. Both with Masonry and with the Eastern Stars, you have to be at least 21 years of age in order to become a member of the Masonic Order. Those regulations were relaxed in a number of jurisdictions, and I'll talk about jurisdictions in a moment. Probably about 40, 50 years ago, maybe a little sooner depending on the area. But with the Eastern Stars, the requirements for membership were even more stringent, because in order to be a Eastern Star, you had to be either a blood relative of a Master Mason. A Master Mason is someone who has gone through the first 3 degrees of Masonry, or you had to be the spouse of a Mason. So not only did you have to be 21, you had to be related in somehow, and that relationship had to be verified. So you have the age thing, you have the relationship thing, and so it did not come as much of a surprise to me when I started looking into the bios of the sorority founders that I did not find any sorority founders who were members of the Eastern Stars. I looked at a number of rather detailed biographies, particularly of the AK and Delta founders, and did not see anything. Tried to look at information for Zetas and Sigma Gamma Rhos, and again, did not see anything. Now, if there's something I missed, please feel free to leave that information in the comments, and to bring to light regarding the founders. I am sure other members at one point or another did go on to join the Eastern Stars, just as other members of the Black Greek of the Black Frats would go on to become Masons and Elks and what have you. But there was no, since none of the sorority founders were members of the Eastern Star, then it makes it very hard to make a case that somehow these sororities were directly influenced by the Eastern Star organizations. So another thing that I used to hear a lot, and depending on where you go, they still mention it, is that the Black Greek organizations have to report or somehow are secretly governed by the Masonic Order. And, that one's just ridiculous. Primarily because one of the things, as I mentioned the issue about jurisdictions earlier, you have to keep in mind that there is no national body for Freemasonry. There is not one national governing body that dictates how the lodges and what have you operate. What you have, particularly here in the United States, is the jurisdictions are usually very state specific. For instance, when I became a Mason, the lodge I joined is part of the Prince Hall Grand Lodge, the most worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Illinois. So jurisdictions are specific usually to states, sometimes to regions, maybe out east in some of the smaller states. One jurisdiction may cover several states, and maybe a little bit of the same thing out west, particularly in the Four Corners area, Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico type thing. But there is no one body that governs Masonry. So one of my questions has always been, I've always asked, is if the Black Greek organizations have to report to Masonry, who do they report to? Which Grand Lodge do they report to? Which lodge do they report to? How is this set up? And of course, no one's ever been able to answer that question. I'm pretty sure no one ever will, even though someone will try. but there's no reporting mechanism in place. Additionally, you have to also take into account the way Black Greek organizations are governed. Now, while each Black Greek organization is an autonomous organization and operates on their own, we do have an associative body, which is called the National Panhellenic Council, or the NPHC. In the NPHC, only the 9 Black Greek organizations are members. There is no Masonic membership or affiliation with the NPHC. Representatives from Masonic Grand Lodge are not invited or allowed to attend NPHC meetings. There is nothing in any minutes or documents or anything that shows that the NPHC is making a report to a Masonic body. So you have to wonder, where does this information come from? Where do these assumptions come from that Black Greek organizations have to report to Masonry? That's a very good question. You have to ask yourself, where do most conspiracy theories come into place? I do think one of the reasons is because there are things that we as Black Greek organizations do not share with others. And so it gives people the impression that we're trying to hide things. But the reality is, there are things that are private to us. There are things that are sacred to us. There are things that are just for us. Just as you don't tell everyone you meet all of your family secrets or all of the machinations in your business or what have you, the Black Greek organizations have the same issue. There are things that are sacred and particular to us and for us only. And that's okay. But people seem to get resentful if you don't tell them everything that they want to know. So because of the secrecy and because of the private nature of how we operate, and people start assuming that, hey, there must be something else going on here. And that's just simply not the case. The reality is that Black Greek organizations, while we have a friendly relationship with Masonic lodges and Grand Lodges, mainly due to the fact that a lot of our members are Freemasons. Now, I heard something, and I just remembered, I heard something recently saying that half of the members of the Black Greek organizations are Masons. And I found that charge interesting because, to my knowledge, there has never been any published information that talks about the memberships of Black Greek organizations and their relationship and their memberships in other organizations. Now, I would guess that probably the actual number is probably somewhere 30% or below. While I do know a number of Black Greek members who are Masons, far more Black Greeks that I know are not Masons. But, it really depends on where you are, and also depends on your age. I think years ago it was much more common for someone to be both in a Black fraternity and a Mason. I think if you go back, 60, 70 years, that was more common than what it is now, mainly because both the Black Greek organizations membership has proportionally kind of dwindled along with Masonry. So again, no direct correlations between the memberships of the organizations. I'm going to wrap this up, but like I said, no, those are the things that I've heard, and they're just not true. Feel free to leave me a comment, drop me a note. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button. Next episode, we'll be talking about the relationship with the Black Greek organizations and the Boule. Remember, you can follow me on Twitter at the Second Rebel. I'm sorry, not the Second Rebel. I don't know what that's another moniker I have. The Rebel Deuce, TherebelDeuce. And until next time, thanks for watching. Hope to see you again.